September 1538. The Gulf of Preveza off the western coast of Greece, an alliance of the greatest naval powers in Christendom, had gathered to end Ottoman rule of the seas once and for all. Spain, Venice, the Papal States, Genoa, over 300 ships, more than 60,000 men, the largest Western fleet assembled in a century. Waiting for them was one man, a former pirate, a man the Spanish called a devil, and the Turks called the gift of God. His name was Hayreddin Barbarossa. And what happened next would define who controlled the Mediterranean for the next 3 decades. But to understand how a landlocked empire ended up commanding the sea, you have to go back almost 200 years. The Ottoman state was born on horseback. In the late 1200s, a Turkish chieftain named Osman carved out a small principality in northwestern Anatolia. His men were cavalry fighters, horse archers, warriors trained for the open steppe and the mountain pass. The sea was not their world. By the mid-1300s, the Ottomans had crossed into Europe at Gallipoli, and the empire was growing fast. But they had a problem, a serious one. The water kept getting in the way. To move troops and supplies across the Aegean, to blockade enemy ports, to project power beyond what a horse could carry. For all of that, they needed ships, and they had almost none that could compete with the established navies of Venice, Genoa, and the Byzantine Empire. The Venetians had been sailing and fighting at sea for 400 years. Their arsenal in Venice, the first industrial complex in European history, could produce a war galley in a single day. The Ottomans had nothing remotely like it. They were a great land empire standing at the edge of a sea they did not yet know how to control. That was about to change. The Ottomans did not build a navy because of ambition alone. They built one because they kept losing without it. In 1416, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed I assembled a fleet near Gallipoli to patrol the straits and challenge Venetian dominance in the Aegean. The Venetian admiral Pietro Loredan found it, attacked it, and destroyed it, almost entirely. Ottoman ships were taken or burned right in their own harbor. That defeat stung. But it also taught the early Ottomans something important. You do not build naval power by rounding up a few ships and hoping for the best. You build it by constructing an entirely different kind of institution. A permanent shipyard, trained crews, a supply chain, an administrative structure devoted entirely to the sea. Mehmed I began rebuilding after 1416. His son Murad II continued. And then came the Sultan, who changed everything. Mehmed II took the throne for the second time in 1451. He was 19 years old. He had one obsession: Constantinople. The Byzantine capital had held out against Ottoman sieges for decades. It sat behind walls that had not been breached in 1,000 years. And critically, it sat on a peninsula surrounded by water on 3 sides. You could not take Constantinople without controlling the water around it. So Mehmed did something no Ottoman ruler had done at this scale before. He built a navy specifically designed to win a siege. By April 1453, Mehmed had a fleet of roughly 120 ships blocking Byzantine supply lines from the sea. The Byzantine chain stretched across the entrance to the Golden Horn, the sheltered harbor on the city's northern side, blocking any Ottoman ships from entering. And for weeks, it held. What happened next is one of the stranger events in military history. Mehmed had 70 to 80 of his ships hauled out of the water, loaded onto greased wooden runners, and dragged overland across a ridge north of the city. They crossed roughly 3 kilometers of land in a single night and were relaunched inside the Golden Horn. The Byzantines woke up to Ottoman galleys floating in their harbor. The chain had not been broken. It had simply been bypassed. Constantinople fell on May 29, 1453, and the city Mehmed renamed Istanbul would become the headquarters of the most ambitious naval construction project the Islamic world had ever attempted. Within a decade, Mehmed established the Tersain-i-Amire, the imperial arsenal. It sat along the Golden Horn, and at its peak it would employ thousands of workers, house hundreds of vessels in dry dock, and produce warships at a pace that shocked European observers who came to see it. The Venetian arsenal was famous, but Ottoman visitors who toured both noted that the Istanbul facility was, in some measurements, larger. Mehmed did not stop there. He understood that ships alone were not enough. He needed men who actually knew how to sail them. And the Ottomans, still fundamentally a land empire in culture and training, had a shortage of experienced sailors. His solution was pragmatic. He recruited, aggressively, Greek sailors from the Aegean Islands, many of whom had sailed under Byzantine or Venetian flags, were folded into the Ottoman naval apparatus. Italian renegades who knew shipbuilding, North African corsairs who had spent their lives raiding the sea lanes. The Ottoman navy that emerged was multinational and multilingual, absorbing the maritime expertise of the entire Eastern Mediterranean. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Aruj and Hizir Reis were the sons of a Greek convert to Islam who had settled on the island of Lesbos. They grew up near the water. They became privateers, operating out of ports across the North African coast, raiding Spanish and Italian shipping. The Spanish called them the Barbarossa brothers because of their red beards. Aruj was killed fighting the Spanish in 1518. His younger brother Hizir, who would take the name Hayreddin, offered his services and the ports he controlled to the Ottoman Sultan Selim I. In return, he asked for Ottoman military backing against the Spanish. The Ottomans said yes. The arrangement was strategic genius, and both sides knew it. Hayreddin got the resources and legitimacy of the world's most powerful empire behind him. The Ottomans got a forward operating base in the Western Mediterranean and one of the most gifted naval commanders alive. When Suleiman the Magnificent made Hayreddin Barbarossa his Caputan Pasha, the Grand Admiral of the entire Ottoman fleet, in 1533, he was not making a political appointment. He was giving command of his navy to the man who had actually been fighting at sea for 30 years. Hayreddin immediately went to work modernizing the fleet's tactics, logistics, and command structure. He trained gunners, revised the spacing of galleys in formation, and developed coordination systems between the heavier war galleys and the faster, lighter vessels used for scouting. And then came 1538. The Holy League fleet that arrived at Preveza had numbers and prestige on its side. 302 ships against roughly 122 Ottoman vessels. Andrea Doria, the finest Italian admiral of his generation, commanded the Christian forces. The Pope had personally blessed the enterprise, but Hayreddin had chosen his ground carefully. The Gulf of Preveza has a narrow entrance. In open water, the larger Christian fleet could surround and overwhelm the Ottomans. But inside the Gulf, numbers mattered far less. Hayreddin knew the currents, the shoals, the wind patterns in that channel. He knew something else too. Andrea Doria and the Venetian commanders deeply distrusted each other. The Holy League was a coalition held together by fear of the Ottomans, not by any genuine unity of command. When Doria finally moved to engage, Hayreddin sent his faster vessels against the flanks of the Holy League formation, while the main Ottoman line held the entrance to the Gulf. The Christian fleet could not concentrate its firepower without ships running aground. Units began holding back, waiting for orders that never came. Clearly, the Holy League fleet retreated. Hayreddin had not sunk the entire Christian armada, but he had broken it as a fighting force, and the psychological effect was enormous. The alliance fractured. Venice began negotiating separately with the Ottomans within months. By the 1550s, the Ottoman fleet operated freely from the Western Mediterranean to the Red Sea. Hayreddin died in 1546, having never lost a major engagement as Grand Admiral. Ottoman control of the Mediterranean was not just military, it was economic. The trade lanes between the Eastern and Western Mediterranean ran through or near Ottoman-controlled territory. Customs revenue, tribute from vassal ports, the licensing of merchant convoys, all of it flowed into Istanbul. The empire that had started as a cavalry force in the Anatolian hills was now extracting revenue from goods moving between Africa, the Levant, and Europe. The sea had been turned into an Ottoman enterprise, but there were limits, and they mattered. In October 1571, a new Holy League, built this time around the determination of a young Spanish prince named Don John of Austria, engaged the Ottoman fleet at the Gulf of Patras, near a town called Lepanto. The Christian fleet used a new weapon heavily. Large sailing warships mounted with heavier cannon, less maneuverable than galleys but capable of tremendous firepower at range. The Ottoman fleet was destroyed, roughly 200 ships lost, thousands of men killed. Ali Pasha, the Ottoman Grand Admiral, was killed in the fighting. His head was displayed on the prow of Don John's flagship. Europe celebrated as though the Ottoman threat to the sea was finished. It was not. Within a year, the Ottoman arsenal had replaced the lost ships. Not the experienced crews, not the commanders. Those losses took longer to recover from. But the ships themselves replaced in a single building season. The Grand Vizier Sokolu Mehmed Pasha reportedly told the Venetian ambassador that the difference was this: if Venice won a battle at sea, it lost a fleet. When the Ottomans lost a battle at sea, they rebuilt a fleet. That was what 120 years of institutional investment had built. Not just ships, a system that could keep producing ships indefinitely, faster than any rival could match. The Ottoman naval story is one of the more underappreciated chapters in world history. A dynasty that started with no coastline and no maritime tradition, no shipbuilding culture, no naval heritage at all, systematically built itself into the dominant sea power of the 16th century Mediterranean. Not through luck. Not through a single genius emperor. Through institutional investment, strategic recruitment of foreign expertise, and a willingness to absorb failure and rebuild. The arsenal was the key. When you can build a warship faster than your enemy can destroy one, war at sea becomes a different calculation entirely. If you found this worth your time, hit subscribe. The next video covers the one moment that nearly collapsed the entire Ottoman naval system before it ever reached its peak, and the admiral who rebuilt it.